get truth and justice for our nuclear test veterans, because if we don't do that as a country, the words that we speak about veterans will forever be hollow words.
It hits you, it throws you into the ground, it burns you.
Although I've had cancer, I've had a blood disorder, cancer, they said I've got the wrong sort of cancers and it wasn't due to radiation.
My father told his GP that he had been flying through nuclear clouds.
Blood was bursting out my mouth like Dracula, dripping all down my clean whites.
As anybody will realise, the death of your child is something that is very traumatic.
Keir Starmer, first Prime Minister to definitely know that this happened.
It's hard sometimes to grade injustices, but this one is, you could say, the most epic of them all.
While everyone else marks VE Day, the Mirror is fighting for the veterans whose sacrifice has kept us safe ever since. The troops who took part in nuclear weapons tests during the Cold War have been battling an invisible enemy for 7 decades. The Mirror is the only newspaper that has been with them every step of the way. Today, we're here at Scotland Yard to hand over evidence of crimes by the British state committed against these forgotten heroes.
Hello.
You know Jane, don't you?
Lovely to see you. Looking so
My name is Brian Unthank. I was 19 years old as a cook when I was posted to Christmas Island. On the day in question, I was ordered up, go and sit under that coconut palm, draw your knees up, put your hands over your eyes and listen to the tannoy. That was the whole sum total of my instructions. If you lived to be 1,000,000 years old, you would never ever describe the depth of brilliance. And my eyes were shut, my hands were pushed into my eyes. I saw every single bone, tendon, bloodline, all the way through my closed eyes and hands. After that, we were told to get up, run into the clearing. There was a big, thick, black line hurtling toward you. Behind that, there was this ball, humongous ball of fire, boiling up into the sky with a white tail coming down. The black line is hurtling toward you. It hits you. It throws you into the ground. It burns you. It doesn't blister you. And that is the actual end of the first bomb that I did.
Can you tell us what happened after you came home from Christmas Island?
Blood was bursting out my mouth like Dracula, dripping all down my clean whites. And I rushed to the medical centre and they rushed around looking for ice cubes to freeze my mouth to stop the bleeding. It didn't work. They found out that all the gums on my teeth were back beyond the roots, and I had to have an emergency operation to remove all my teeth, and I was 20 years old.
Jane, can you tell us what your dad did at the nuclear tests?
He was the squadron commander of 76 Squadron, which was the squadron of Canberras. His role was to fly through the mushroom clouds after each test and take air samples, which were then returned to base with his crews, and his title was the sniff boss.
Terry was being monitored for the effects of radiation, not by doctors, but by the weapons scientists. In 2022, the Mirror uncovered a top-secret memo detailing 7 blood tests taken from him over 15 months while he flew through 5 different mushroom clouds. The scientists said his blood was showing gross irregularity, but they never told his doctors.
He was diagnosed by some specialists as having TB meningitis. Not all the specialists were convinced that this was the cause. They couldn't find any neurological reason for the disease, but it did cause a stroke that lost him the full side of one of his sides. And they had no information until my father told his GP that he had been flying through nuclear clouds and that there was any access to nuclear radiation. So the doctors were working blind.
Jane had to fight the MOD in court to see her dad's medical records, and when she finally won, the blood tests were missing, and there was evidence Terry was monitored for more than a decade afterwards. This is the crucial bit of information that led to the entire scandal. It's a telegram from the atomic weapons scientists at Christmas Island back to Aldermaston in Berkshire, classified secret. Now, these blood tests, particularly his white blood cell count, shows a similar blood cell count as you would have in a radiotherapy patient today. And we now know from his medical records that his daughter obtained, he was still having blood tests and being monitored with blood testing and chest x-rays at least until 1969, which is 11 years later.
My name is John Morris. I'm currently 87 years old. In 1956 I was sent to Christmas Island. I was in charge of sorting out the laundry for all the personnel that were on the island, including the aircraft pilots, the engineers that were cleaning the planes, and half the time some of the uniforms we got were contaminated with radiation dust. I went for a war pension. They said, although I've had cancer, I've had a blood disorder, cancer, they said I've got the wrong sort of cancers and it wasn't due to radiation.
4 years after John returned from Christmas Island, he and wife Betty had a healthy baby boy called Stephen. One morning when he was 4 months old, they awoke to find him dead in his cot. The couple were arrested for murder before it was ruled to have been the result of a serious chest infection. But Stephen showed no signs of illness, and after 60 years, when he was finally able to see the post-mortem, John found out the death could have been due to a lung deformity. He and Betty spent a lifetime terrified for their other children and grandchildren.
As anybody will realise, the death of your child is something that is very traumatic. And I went to my doctor and he took blood tests and suggested that I had pernicious anemia. I was aged 26, and to this day I believe that pernicious anemia was caused through the radioactive environments that I'd been on in Christmas Island for nearly 16 months. And I will always blame the MOD for my problem over my blood.
My son, Alan, he was born with what is called Duane syndrome, where his right eye was locked into his nose. All you could see was the white of his eye. They had to do several operations before they could get it into the right position. His left eye is locked forward, so he's now left with this sort of vision.
The MOD always denied that any blood testing took place. Its officials, lawyers and even ministers told the public, Parliament and judges that there was no biological monitoring. Last year, the Mirror uncovered 4,000 pages of evidence at the atomic weapons establishment hidden on a secret database, which included more than 30 orders for blood testing, thousands of results and hundreds of named individuals being called up for testing. We've also found dozens of veterans whose medical records from the time are mysteriously missing.
There are still missing months of his medical records from Christmas Island and blood test records.
I believe it's 20 years of my annual medical tests.
I was also x-rayed prior to going to Christmas Island, of which I was totally unaware of, and I was also x-rayed when I was being demobbed, and there is no results of what those x-rays contained, showed. As I say, I was totally unaware that I had them done until I got my medical records from the MOD.
Now the time has come to present our evidence to the police and ask them to investigate these crimes.
It's important to be here today on this of all days when people in public life, like myself, are making comments about people who served our country and the respect we have for them, which we all do, huge. But those words will be hollow words if we leave this group of veterans in the wilderness still fighting. It's incumbent on every single person in public office who is rightly showing respect for those who served our country to now step forward and get truth and justice for our nuclear test veterans. Because if we don't do that as a country, the words that we speak about veterans will forever be hollow words.
The Metropolitan Police will now decide how to deal with the evidence the veterans have presented. But one thing we already know for certain. Keir Starmer is the first Prime Minister to definitely know in full the harm that was done to these men to obtain the weapons which are all that have kept us safe for more than 70 years. Our nuclear veterans were subject to unethical human experimentation with radiation, without informed consent, without the right to withdraw, and the government has now admitted without medical supervision. They have kept us safe for 70 years, and in return successive governments have demonised, traumatised and ignored them. It is time to answer their questions. It is time to pay the debt. It's time to tell the truth. And it's up to the Prime Minister to decide whether that's what he's now going to do.